Welcome back to a new episode of Aladdin's Global Adventure. Today we're going to be diving into the fascinating history of globalization
Oh, yeah.
and its impact on business leadership.
Yeah, it's going to be quite a journey.
Get ready for some aha moments.
Absolutely.
Did you know that the introduction of the potato in the 18th century
Oh, wow.
arguably kickstarted the Americanization of Germany?
That's a great example of how even seemingly small events
Right.
can have these ripple effects across the global landscape.
Exactly.
And that's really what we're going to explore today.
Yeah.
The peaks and valleys of globalization,
Yeah.
from its origins in the 19th century
Right.
all the way to the forces that are shaping its current transformation.
Yeah, and it's not just a history lesson, though.
No.
By understanding how globalization has transformed in the past,
Yeah.
you'll gain insights into the challenges and opportunities facing business leaders today.
Absolutely.
Think of it as a crash course in navigating the complex global landscape.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll be tracing globalization's impact through three distinct waves,
Okay.
exploring what fueled each surge and why it eventually receded.
Got it.
And then we'll examine how globalization is evolving in the present,
Okay.
moving away from that one-size-fits-all model towards regionalization.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
To set the stage.
Okay.
The first globalization emerged in the 19th century,
Yes.
driven by industrial capitalism
Uh-huh.
and colonial expansion.
Right.
Think of European powers weaving commercial networks across Africa and Asia,
Yeah.
often backed by military might.
It was a time of significant change.
Huge.
And it wasn't just about political control either.
Right.
This expansion profoundly reshaped economies.
Exactly.
For example, European textile factories boomed,
Okay.
but traditional manufacturing hubs like India struggled to compete.
Oh.
They were forced into the role of commodity exporters.
Wow.
Their economies essentially restructured to serve the needs of the colonial powers.
So even back then, globalization was creating winners and losers. But
Absolutely.
here's a counterintuitive point.
Okay.
This increased interconnectedness didn't prevent war.
No, it didn't.
In fact, World War I shattered the delicate balance of the first globalization.
It really did. The war disrupted the global order in profound ways.
Wow.
The gold standard meant to stabilize currencies, forced countries to restrict financial flows,
Right.
to protect their reserves.
Yeah.
International trade plummeted due to naval blockades and a shortage of merchant ships.
Oh, wow.
To illustrate the impact, China's imports fell by a staggering 34% during the war.
That really highlights how quickly global ties can unravel.
It does.
But of course, globalization didn't disappear.
No.
It reemerged after World War II in a new form.
Right. This second globalization was shaped by the post-war boom
Okay.
and the establishment of the Bretton Woods system in 1947.
Okay.
The system aimed to stabilize exchange rates,
Got it.
promote freer trade, and control financial flows to prevent crises like the Great Depression.
So there was a conscious effort to manage globalization and mitigate its risks.
There was, but even the best-laid plans
Yeah.
can have unintended consequences.
Right, exactly.
The Bretton Woods system, while well-intentioned, had contradictions.
Yeah.
It promoted trade, but simultaneously restricted finance,
Uh-huh.
highlighting the inherent tensions in managing a globalized economy.
Right.
And importantly, the second wave of globalization didn't benefit everyone equally.
Right. Developing countries in particular faced significant challenges.
They did.
They were often excluded from the full benefits of this new global order.
Yes. Many developing countries remained reliant on exporting just one or two commodities,
Right.
making them vulnerable to price fluctuations.
Yeah.
High tariffs in wealthier countries often block their industrial exports,
Right.
hindering their development.
Right.
This led to critiques of globalization from economists like Raoul Prebisch.
Now, Prebisch argued that developing countries needed to focus on building domestic industries
Yes.
and reducing their dependence on commodity exports.
Uh-huh.
This line of thinking led some countries to adopt policies of autarky,
Right.
emphasizing self-reliance and economic independence.
Yeah, think of China, India, and the Soviet Union during this period.
Right, they sought to minimize their reliance on the global economy
Exactly.
and chart their own course.
Uh-huh. But the story doesn't end there.
Okay.
In the mid-1980s, a third wave of globalization began to take shape,
Okay.
fueled by a few key developments,
Yeah.
including a seemingly humble invention,
Okay.
the shipping container.
It's funny to think about it now, but some early skeptics argued that goods would actually take up less space if shipped individually,
Yeah.
not packed into these large metal boxes.
It does seem counterintuitive now, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But containerization drastically reduced transportation costs,
Right.
making it much more efficient to move goods across vast distances.
And this coincided with deregulation in transportation and finance, along with rapid advancements in computing and communications.
It did.
All these factors created the perfect conditions for the growth of global value chains.
Exactly. This marked a fundamental shift from traditional manufacturing where products were typically made in one place.
Yeah.
Global value chains broke down production into distinct stages, each located wherever it's most advantageous in terms of cost, expertise, or resources.
So you might have design happening in one country, raw materials sourced from another components manufactured in several different locations, and final assembly happening somewhere else entirely.
Exactly.
It sounds incredibly complex.
It is complex, but also incredibly efficient.
Right.
Yet, as with previous waves, the third globalization had unforeseen consequences.
Right. There were rising concerns about inequality, job losses in developed countries due to outsourcing, and the controversial role of government subsidies in shaping global trade.
Yeah.
This was particularly evident with the rise of China as a manufacturing powerhouse.
China's entry into the World Trade Organization in 2001 was a pivotal moment. Its rapid industrialization, coupled with government subsidies for its export-oriented industries, led to the China price phenomenon.
Oh,
Essentially, Chinese goods were often so cheap that they undercut competitors globally, driving many companies out of business and leading to job losses in developed economies.
so we've seen globalization rise, fall, and rise again in new forms. It's been a fascinating journey so far.
Yeah.
But where does this leave us today? We've gone from 18th century potatoes to 21st century smartphones, and it's clear that globalization is a force that touches every aspect of our lives.
What it is.
But where are we now in this historical trajectory?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We've journeyed through 3 distinct waves of globalization, each with its own characteristics and impacts.
Right.
And now it seems we're in the midst of a 4th wave,
Okay.
one that's markedly different from its predecessors.
Let's dive into this fourth wave in part 2. So we're on the cusp of this fourth wave of globalization.
Yeah.
What makes it so different? Okay, of the risks associated with globalization,
Huh?
particularly in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we've seen a slowdown in global trade growth,
Right.
a reevaluation of those long, complex value chains,
Yeah.
and increasing government intervention
Okay.
in trade and investment.
It seems like the unfettered globalization that we saw in the late 20th and early 21st centuries
Right.
is giving way to a more cautious, calculated approach.
Exactly.
Like we've learned some lessons, maybe?
Yeah, and one of the most striking aspects of this shift
Yeah.
is the move towards regionalization.
Okay.
Instead of pursuing those big global trade agreements,
Right.
countries are increasingly focused on building stronger economic ties
Yeah.
within their own regions.
We see this in the rise of regional trade agreements.
We do.
As a sort of alternative to global deals like the Doha round, which ultimately failed.
Right.
And let's not forget about the British vote to leave the European Union.
Which was driven in part by anxieties about the impact of globalization on jobs and wages.
A very clear example.
Yeah, a really good example.
It highlights the sense that the pendulum is swinging away
Yeah.
from global integration and towards a more localized approach.
So what does all this mean for business leaders?
Yeah.
How can they adapt and thrive in this changing landscape? It's like the very stage is shifting beneath their feet.
That's where the author's advice really hits home.
Okay.
They're not suggesting that we abandon globalization altogether,
Right.
but rather that we navigate it smarter.
Okay.
Think of it like sailing, not just floating along.
So ditch the set it and forget it approach to global strategy.
Exactly. The days of simply chasing the lowest production cost are fading.
Okay.
Remember our Oregon produce handler with mountains of onions rotting on the docks during that port lockout?
Yeah.
A painful lesson in supply chain vulnerability.
Right.
And the fragility a hyper-focus on cheapness can create.
Ouch. Yeah. A stark reminder that minimizing production costs shouldn't be the only priority.
Right.
What are some of the alternatives the author suggests?
Well, first and foremost, diversify your suppliers.
Okay.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket, geographically speaking.
Right.
If one region gets hit with a disruption, you've got backups in place.
Makes sense. Spread the risk.
Right. And think about building in more slack into your system.
Okay.
Maybe that means holding a bit more inventory than you used to just in case.
Okay.
Or having alternative production sites you can quickly spin up.
So a little less just in time
Yeah.
and a bit more just in case.
Precisely. It's a balancing act for sure.
Yeah?
And it's not just about physical goods anymore.
Right.
Think about data flows, intellectual property, all the intangible stuff that makes the global economy hum.
Oh, right, like those data localization laws popping up everywhere.
Exactly.
Governments wanting to control where certain information is stored and processed.
Exactly. That adds a whole new layer of complexity, right?
Yeah.
You've got to understand the specific rules of each region you're operating in. A one-size-fits-all approach just won't cut it anymore.
It's almost like globalization is becoming more granular,
Yeah.
more regionally focused.
I think that's a great way to put it.
Okay.
And it's not just about reacting to these shifts.
Okay.
The author really emphasizes the need to anticipate what's coming next.
So thinking like a chess player, several moves ahead.
Yes. Investing in technology that keeps you nimble.
Oh, okay.
Scanning the horizon for potential disruptions, whether they're political, technological, or environmental.
It sounds like agility is the name of the game in this new era of globalization.
Absolutely. The ability to adapt, to innovate, to pivot when needed.
Right.
Those are the skills that will set businesses apart.
This has been an insightful discussion on the changing nature of globalization.
It has.
But how can our listeners apply these insights to their own businesses?
That's what we'll explore in part 3.
So we've explored the shifts and turns of globalization.
We have.
But how does this all translate into action for business leaders?
Yeah, that's the crucial question, isn't it?
Yeah. We've talked about the need for agility,
Right.
for anticipating risks, for understanding the nuances of regional markets.
Right.
But what does that actually look like in practice?
Right. How do you take these big global insights and
Yeah.
apply them to your own specific business?
Well, the author offers some concrete advice. First, let's revisit the concept of global value chains.
Okay.
They offer efficiency, but they also come with risks.
It's a bit of a tightrope walk, isn't it?
It is.
You need that balance between maximizing benefits and mitigating risks.
Exactly. The disruptions we've seen in recent years, from the 2008 financial crisis to the COVID-19 pandemic,
Oh, yeah.
have really exposed the vulnerabilities of those complex, globally dispersed value chains.
Right.
Businesses that rely heavily on single-source suppliers or have limited flexibility in their production processes have been particularly hard hit.
So what's the takeaway? Should businesses abandon global value chains altogether and just retreat to purely domestic production? Not necessarily. The author isn't advocating for a wholesale rejection of global value chains.
Okay.
It's about taking a more nuanced approach.
So it's about understanding the trade-offs, right?
Yeah,
Weighing the potential benefits against the potential risks.
exactly. In some cases, maintaining those long-distance value chains might still make sense.
Okay.
But it's crucial to build in safeguards such as diversifying suppliers, increasing inventory levels, and exploring alternative production locations.
Right.
It's about having a plan B and maybe even a plan C.
That old adage, don't put all your eggs in one basket, rings truer than ever.
Absolutely. Businesses need to spread their risk, build in redundancies, and be prepared for the unexpected.
Right.
And remember, this applies not only to physical supply chains, but also to the flow of information.
In today's digital world, data security, privacy, and managing the flow of information across borders are paramount.
They are, right? Think about the rise of data localization laws, where governments are mandating that certain types of data be stored and processed within their borders.
It's just another layer of complexity for businesses to navigate.
It is.
And it highlights the increasing importance of understanding and complying with regional regulations.
Absolutely. It's not just about physical goods moving across borders anymore.
Right.
It's about data intellectual property, those intangible flows that underpin the global economy.
So to sum up the author's advice,
Yeah.
embrace flexibility, prioritize resilience, understand those regional nuances, and invest in innovation.
Yeah.
These are essential strategies for navigating the shifting sands of globalization.
Well summarized, but it's not just about checking boxes.
No.
It's about developing a mindset that embraces change, anticipates challenges, and constantly seeks new opportunities.
Right. It's not a one-size-fits-all prescription.
No.
It's about taking these principles and tailoring them to your unique circumstances.
Exactly. For example, the decision of whether to maintain a global value chain or shift towards regional production will depend on your specific industry, your risk tolerance, and your long-term strategic goals.
It's about making informed decisions, weighing the pros and cons, and being prepared to adapt as the global landscape continues to evolve.
That's precisely it. And as we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Okay.
We've explored the broad trends of globalization,
Right.
but the real impact is felt at the industry and company level.
Okay, so here's a final thought-provoking question for you, dear listener.
Yeah.
How do these forces manifest in your specific industry?
Yeah. What unique challenges
Yeah.
and opportunities do you see emerging?
Are there regional alliances you need to forge?
Exact.
Technologies you need to master?
This is where the real work begins.
Right.
Taking these global insights and applying them to your unique context.
It's all about application.
It is, because ultimately globalization isn't just an abstract concept.
Right.
It's the sum total of millions of individual decisions
Yeah.
made by businesses like yours.
And the choices you make today will shape the future of globalization tomorrow. They keep learning, keep adapting, and keep pushing the boundaries.
Well said. And remember, this deep dive is just a starting point.
Right.
There's a wealth of resources out there
Absolutely.
for those who want to explore this topic further.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the history and future of globalization.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, stay curious.